Hello students, welcome to another session of Mains PYQs. Hope you are using the initiative effectively and practicing previous year questions every day. Okay. Today we are going to discuss another question of CSC 2023 GS paper 1 of history part, and today we will be seeing one question on modern history. Okay. So coming directly to the question. The question talks about how did the colonial rule affect the tribals in India, and what was the tribal response to the colonial oppression. Okay, so the two keywords in the answer in the question are how and what. Okay, so you don't have to put a very critical view of the question. Okay, you just have to explain the 2 points. The first part is how did the colonial rule affect the tribals, and next what was their response. Okay, so the body will be divided into 2 parts, the impact and the response. So we start with the introduction. Here in the introduction you can talk about how the advent of British rule brought new changes in political, economic and administrative systems. Okay, so they moved a lot of furniture, and when you move furniture, toe gets stubbed. So it was these tribals whose toes were getting stubbed because of the rapid and very drastic changes brought by British in the political, economic and administrative spheres. Okay, another idea for the introduction would be the earlier rulers, the Indian rulers, had mostly kept out of the tribal areas. Okay, not to encourage them. Okay, but because of the British greed, they entered into these territories and started taking over their lands. Okay, so this brought the tribals in conflict with the British. Okay, so one you can highlight on the greed of British. Okay, and how they intruded into the tribal territories. Okay, next we come to the body. As I told you, the body will have 2 parts. First was the impact. What impact did the colonial rule have on these people? So the first point will be in the tribal areas, they don't have ownership rights of land. All the land, all the forest is jointly owned by community. Okay, so they had system of joint ownership or the community ownership. Okay, but when the British brought the permanent settlement of 1793, okay, they said all the land would go under a zamindar who will collect the revenues and deposit the revenue to the government. Okay, so this changed the land dynamics of that time. Okay, it was a big change for them because earlier they did not have to pay any kind of tax to anyone. Suddenly they know that they are a certain person is their zamindar and they have to pay rent to them for living in their own land which they have been inhabited for centuries. Okay, next we see forest policies. Forest policy of 1884 and Forest Act of 1865. Okay, so these 2 policies, the British had formulated them to seclude the forest areas for their private use, for their exclusive use. What happened is that first railway came in 1853, and the railways and other infrastructure as well needed a lot of timber, and the only source of timber was the forest. So British started carving out forest lands and taking them over and saying, no, you cannot collect timber here, this is our land. So this impacted the people who have been living there for centuries. Okay. Next we see shifting agriculture. Shifting agriculture or jhum cultivation as it is also called. So what happens here is that they divide land into parts, into sectors. They cultivate a particular land and then they clear the forest by burning then they cultivate it for a few years, and then they leave that parcel of land for a few years for it to regenerate and trees to grow. So this is the system they have been following for centuries. But now, because of the forest policy, which was carving out territories for their British's exclusive use, the tribals could not practice the shifting agriculture. So it was a big impact for them, because how would they sustain if they cannot grow their own food grains? Next, we have exploitation. Okay, so what happened is that the British allowed the Indian rulers mostly wanted to keep the forest people, the tribal people, away, not to have any grudge, any kind of animosity towards them. So they did not interfere in their lives. But after the British came, okay, and commercial agriculture came, commercialization of agriculture happened, and then money lenders started entering the tribal areas. So what used to happen is they would sell the tribal people things they don't need, okay, at a very usurious rate of interest, and then when they buy, they would be under their debt. Okay, so it led to exploitation of tribals. Next, we see displacement. Displacement, it was seen in Assam tea gardens. So what happened is that British wanted the mountains for tea cultivation, so they cleared the forest and removed and dislocated all the tribal people who have been living there for centuries. This caused a lot of friction. Okay. Next we see religious issue. Okay. The tribals who worshipped forest, trees, and natural forces was seen down upon by the British, and the religion was ridiculed. Okay, and also there was a issue of missionary activities. The British thought the tribals were easier. They were the easiest to be converted. Okay, because the established religions like Hinduism and Islam, they had very strong philosophical systems to back it. Okay, but the missionaries wanted to influence the tribals into Christianity. Okay, so this was seen as a big threat to their culture and religion. Next, we see alien system of governance. Okay, British, what they did, they established a system of police. Okay, the Daroga and Thana system. Okay, and it was very new to the tribals because they did not have any kind of oversight like that. Okay, there used to be some kind of law and order system which was enforced by the local rulers. Okay, but it did not impact them very much. But the British systems of Thanas and Thanedas and Darogas was very intrusive, as they started to patrol tribal areas as well. Okay. Next, alien system of justice. The justice system brought by the British, which was standardized, and there were courts and process to follow. For any kind of dispute, you have to hire a lawyer to get justice. Okay, it was very new to them and it was very alien to them. They had very little affinity to this system. Okay, because they had very little exposure to the outside world. Even the people of India, the people who were living in plains, even they had a lot of issues dealing with these kind of new systems of justice. So it was all the way more difficult for the tribals who were anyway not part of the mainstream society till now. Okay, and then there's criminalization. Criminal Tribes Act of 1891. So what used to happen is that the tribal people who used to relocate, move around, okay, Britain started to see them very suspiciously and branded a few of them as criminal tribes. Like all of their activities would now be under scrutiny and they will be under close supervision. Okay, so this was a big affront to their dignity. Okay, and this the stigma from this CTA Act still prevents in a number of tribal communities. Okay, so this is how we see the tribal communities was impacted because of the British rule. Next, we see what was the impact. Sorry, what was the response? What did the tribals? How did they respond to these kind of exploitation and discrimination? Okay, first was revolts and rebellions. It was very common. Most popular was Santhal rebellion, 1855-56. Okay, then there's Munda rebellion, 1894. Okay, so these are how we see the 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 tribals rose up in revolt against the exploitative systems of the British. Okay, they rose like they mostly did not want the interference of outsiders like moneylenders and the police, okay, the administration. So they called them Dikus. Outsiders were called Dikus, okay, and it was a revolt against them. Okay. Next, a few tribal people joined the national movement. Okay, when they saw that British was their common enemy, the people fighting for the independence of India were also fighting against the British, and the tribals also wanted to get rid of the British. Okay, so when they saw that the enemy, their enemy was common, they joined forces. Okay, leaders like Rani Gadinu, okay. Next, we have forest movement by Bishnois in the 1730s, when the British started to take over the Bishnoi lands. Okay, they started a movement to protect their land and their culture. Okay, and it was the inspiration behind the other forest movements we saw in the second half of 20th century. Okay, next we saw movements for cultural revival. Okay, Bishnoi movement was also an example of a movement led by the tribals for the culture revival. So they saw that the onslaught of the outside culture, not exactly British, but even the mainstream culture, was impinging, taking over their culture. Okay, so they started to protect it. Okay, and promoting their language and their culture. Next, we see non-violent movements. Okay, because they had seen how the British would suppress very ruthlessly the violent movements, so they took ideas from the national movement and started non-violent movements. Okay, leaders like Jalkari Bai of Central India started use the ideas, okay, and the principle of non-violent movement to protect their own rights. Okay, so this was the response of the tribals against the colonial rule. Now coming to the conclusion. Okay, in conclusion, you can say the different kind of response. There was violent outbursts, there were non-violent movements, there were organized movement which joined the stream of the freedom struggle. So you see the different kind of movements show the diversity and resilience of tribal community. Okay, and another idea for the conclusion, you can talk about the tribal panchil. Here what happened is that after independence, okay, the Indian leaders realized what were the issues of the tribals. Okay, so it was a choice for them, like which path to take. Okay, one was the path of forced mainstreaming. Okay, it talked about the tribals as backward Hindus. Okay, so what happened is that the tribals were seen as backward Hindus. they will see that if we mainstream them forcibly, they will be developed. Okay. Another theory was keeping them secluded and preserving them as specimens of earlier lifestyle, the specimens of tribal lifestyle. Okay. And the middle path which was tribal panchil. Okay, it talked about how we cannot forcibly mainstream them and also not leave them behind. Okay, so the best way is to help them develop systems of self-government wherein they can develop at their own pace. They don't feel that they are being exploited or they are being coerced into anything. They can develop with their own pace as soon and as much as they want. We will give them autonomy and they can introduce our organized systems into their cultures, their areas as they feel best. Okay, so that was the idea of tribal panchil. So these are the two ideas for conclusion as well. Okay, so we'll meet you again with discussion on another question. Thank you.